Morning, it's 9 o'clock. I would like to call the meeting to order. I'd like to begin by acknowledging that we're in Treaty 1 territory and the traditional homeland of the Métis Nation. I'll introduce the members of the panel. To my far left is Mr. Robert Hutchings. To my immediate left is Ms. Linda McFadgen. My name is Stu McPherson. I'll be chairing the hearing today. The secretary for today's hearing is Ms. Michelle Neepin, and representing the City of Winnipeg Assessment Taxation Department is Mr. Ken Wong. We'll be hearing applications for the revision of the assessment roll in accordance with the Municipal Assessment Act. The matters for which revision is requested have been described in each application. We'll limit discussions to those matters. The statements that applicants or the assessor make at this hearing are sworn testimony. Anyone speaking to the matters must be sworn in. Please be advised that comparisons of assessments of properties are not considered evidence of market value by the Board of Revision. The Board of Revision is appointed annually by Council. It's independent of it and the City Administration. It makes its decisions on the basis of the evidence provided at this hearing and issues a written order that will be mailed to all parties as soon as possible. Please note the Board's decisions with respect to an application may be appealed to the Manitoba Municipal Board if the matter pertains to assessed value or classification, or to the Court of Queen's Bench if the matter pertains to the application of exemptions from taxation. Should you wish to appeal, information on how to do so will be included with the Board's order. With respect to the hearing process, I'll confirm the matters to be addressed with each applicant following the swearing in. We'll then have the assessor's testimony followed by questions the applicant may have, and then the applicant's testimony followed by questions. Each side will have an opportunity to summarize if they so wish. Once all the evidence about an application has been brought forward, the applicant may leave. The process will repeat for each item on the docket today. The session will close after all the applications have been heard, and the Board will deliberate in private and make its decisions. We'll receive the order by registered mail as soon as possible. Just as information, all public hearings are live streamed, recorded, and will be part of the public record. I'll just swear the parties in, please.
Do you affirm or do you affirm? Affirm? Can you state your full name, please?
Ken Wong.
Do you affirm that the evidence you're about to give at this hearing should be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
City.
Thank you. Can you state your full name, please?
Trevor Glenn Smith.
Do you swear that the evidence you're about to give at this hearing should be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Morning, Mr. Smith.
Good morning.
You're representing the owners for, I guess, 4 properties on the docket today. And the matters to be dealt with are the amount of assessed value, not classification or liability in each case.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. We'll just hear these in the order that they are in the docket. So we'll begin with 693 Maryland Street. So whenever you're ready, Mr. Wong, we'll hear from you, please, starting with the roll number in each instance, please.
Okay. The subject property is 693 Maryland. Roll number is 130-502-12000. It's a residential apartment block that's 3 stories high. It was built in 1913, but we have an effective year built of 1945 because of some renovation work that was done. There are 16 suites with no outdoor parking. On page 2 are some sales of the subject property and their compliance for request for information, which is just for the 2015 mailer year. There was a sale in February 2015 for $510,000. On page 3 is our income valuation summary. We use average rents of $863 to get a net or gross potential of $165,000. Use a 2.8% vacancy to get an effective gross income of $161,000. And we use a 54% expense ratio to get a net operating income of $73,000. Capped at 6% with an estimated market value of $1,220,000. On page 4 are our rent comparables. The rents we've used are in line with what's on the market. on how we derive our cap rates. Cap rates from other organizations, which we are in line with. On page 7 are some pictures of the subject property. 7 and 8. On page 9, the income and expense mailer submitted by the owner. Page 11, the property manager indicates that the building was not occupied during 2015. Page 13 and 15 are the permits that were taken out by the owner for the renovation work. The permit values are $240,000 and $80,000, but in speaking with the owner estimated that the renovation costs were $776,000. So the building wasn't occupied in 2015, so we don't really have any actual information to rely on, but the rent information that the model has estimated is supported by the market, and a 54% expense ratio is reasonable for a renovated building. Also, the property sold for $510,000, and combined with the renovations of about $770,000, that is a total of about $1,286,000, which supports the assessed value of $1,220,000. So as you maintain the assessed value at $1,220,000.
Thank you. Mr. Smith, questions for the assessor?
Yes. For the 4 properties we're looking at today, did you have the opportunity to inspect them?
I did not inspect them, but my colleague inspected them for the renovation work.
Okay. A note on the front page that it has 16 suites shown. Is the city aware there's actually 15 suites in the building?
As far as we know, 16 is correct.
Okay, so it hasn't been checked to see what the count is there?
I think it was checked when we inspected it.
Okay.
I mean, if it's
The property traded in 2015 for $510,000, correct?
yes,
And since that time, they added 2 suites, is stated in the permit at the back. Bringing it from, I guess, 13 or 14 to 15 or 16, correct?
yes.
Okay, and our assessment has more than doubled?
The assessment is
$1,220,000?
yes.
Okay. Moving forward, just a quick note on the rent comparables on page number 4. 540 Actually, I'll deal with 3 and 4 first, I guess. Both of those properties would be south of Portage Avenue in the Wolseley neighborhood, correct?
I am not sure.
Okay, they are south of Portage Avenue in Wolseley. Both managed by Sussex, I believe. Appeared that they were in good condition, is that fair to say?
I did not inspect those properties.
Okay.
Based off of the information that we have, the effective year built seem to be similar, and their construction is similar.
The effective year built. Okay. Rent comparable number 2, the Victor Street. This is located significantly further west, I believe. Recently renovated within the last 2 years, a much more complete renovation, including roof, windows, full kitchens, bathrooms, boiler, plumbing, common areas, I believe. Is that correct?
I'm not sure.
Okay. And rent comparable number 1, 540 Maryland, which we just withdrew, is managed by the same property management firm, Armour. It has undergone a renovation and is in better condition than the subject property. Are you aware of that, I guess? It's difficult to ask these questions in a fair manner, I know, so, but I have to ask the question.
Well,
so.
if you want to
I'm
say,
not
like,
gonna
I
argue
haven't
it.
inspected them, as far as I know, they are comparable, and if you say that they're not, then, you know,
Okay.
it's.
And it's always a challenge in how we ask these questions, so I'm not meaning to be argumentative. Moving forward to capitalization rate on page number 5. So the range, this would be a low-rise B property, I'm assuming. Under multifamily in the city of Winnipeg's range, capitalization rate range is from 5 to 6.75%. This property is located in the Spence West End area, built in 1913. What qualifies a property for the 6.75% cap rate?
The age and location.
Okay, so this is 1913, and it's in quite a challenged area of Winnipeg, I think it's fair to say, the Spence neighborhood, significant social issues that didn't qualify it for 6.75%.
No, that 6.75 is only for market region 4, which this is not.
And market region 4 is where?
Would be the Higgins, William area, and Isabel,
So North End.
around that area.
Yeah, okay. And my last question, so I'm looking at pages, I guess, 9 through 11, the mailer that was submitted. So the property wasn't occupied in 2015, and they indicated that on the, pardon me, on the brief that was, or the mailer that was sent in. Would this have been used in the determination of the assessment for the property, or entered into the model?
Well, there's nothing there.
I know, it's a silly question, but, so I'm assuming it
I
would have been
can
entered
say
into.
I can say for sure.
Okay.
I would say probably not.
Okay, those are all my questions, thanks very much.
Thank you. Mr. Hutchings, questions?
Thank you. Mr. Long, any idea or any details of what it was rented up after the renovations in early 2016?
the spring rents were indicated as $775 for a one-bedroom, $900 for a three-bedroom, and $1,050 for a three-bedroom.
Okay, just to confirm, one bedroom at $775, and this is early 2016, after renovations?
It was mid-2016, I believe.
Okay, two bedroom is 900 and three bedroom is 1,050.
Yep.
And it would appear plus some utilities showing separate water meters and separate hydro meters in your pictures there.
I'm not 100% sure what utilities are included.
Yeah, I'm just looking at your picture on page
Yeah,
8.
yeah, I would assume that if they metered them separately, that they would,
Yeah, okay. And last question on the mailer, it says there's a residential caretaker, so I guess one of these suites is out of the total of either 15 or 16 is assigned to a caretaker, according to their
yeah, if,
their mailer.
that's not uncommon.
Yeah, okay. Okay, no other questions, Mr. Chair, thank you.
Thank you.
I have another question.
I just have, looking for a little clarification on page 11, the suite count, because
Yeah.
I think it's gonna come into play here.
Yeah.
But I see the original mailer that was sent out by the city shows 12 two-bedroom suites.
Mhm.
And the permit says add 2. So would that not make it 14? Although the owner says 4, 4, and 7, which would be 15.
My colleague had adjusted the suite counts to 16,
Okay.
and after inspection, so I would think that the 16 suite count is correct.
Okay.
I don't know what she may have based it off of, but it was,
Okay. When was that inspected, Mr. Wong?
in June 2017.
Okay, thank you. And finally, the age variant from 1913 to 1945. Do you know whether that was an estimate, or do you know whether that was calculated? Just an observed age, perhaps?
I believe it was an observed age.
Okay. And would the 1945 affect the cap rate that's applied?
It would
Versus the-
basically, yeah, it would be in the highest cap rate category, meaning anything prior to before 1946 would receive 6%. Unless
So it doesn't affect it, whether it's 1913 or 1945?
No.
Those are my questions. Thank you. Mr. Smith, will you help me with this?
Okay, thank you very much. With regard to the suite count to start with, there appeared to be some confusion on that from reporting by the ownership. It is actually 16 units. I should make that correction to my brief here. I did review the materials again. They had indicated that it was 15, but it is actually 16 units when you go through them. So my apologies for that. One, I hate having any slight errors here, but I do have to make one other correction and bump my value up to $986,000. I had made a slight adjustment to the operating expenses, which boosts the NOI and of course the final valuation. So $986,000 is my valuation for the property. So Moving forwards, property did undergo some renovations in 2015. Was purchased for $510,000. They did add a couple of suites to the property. And just looking at my page number 3 on the chart there, we can have just a very general overview. The property is originally built in 1913, so that is the structure that we're looking at. Wood frame from that time frame with the stone foundation and all of the structural components from that time period. So we're not looking at a building of more recent construction. It has, of course, had some renovation done to it over time, as most properties have, but it's not accurate to characterize it as a building built in the 40s. Moving to the bottom of that chart, you can see the breakout of the units. We have 4 1-beds, 8 2-beds, and 4 what they're calling 3-bedroom units, which are very small bedrooms from what I'm indicated in those particular units, but they do have 3 bedrooms. Photographs of the property are shown on the next number of pages. Again, it is in the Spence West Broadway area. You can see the exterior condition of the building, fire escapes, graffiti. Then we move into the interior and you can see the common areas. The common areas are as shown there. You can see the significant wear and tear and damage that has occurred both over time and recently. I do have to indicate I was not able to access the interior of any of these suites in this particular block. We attended twice and I was not able to gain entry to the particular units. It is indicated that there has been some renovation done to those units. So I believe that the type of renovations will fall in line with the other properties that we're looking at today, because we have properties that are all managed by the same company with some degree of common ownership between them. So there was a generally common nature of how they were doing some renovations in these units. So while I can't show the interiors, that is the indication that I have. Moving forward, building improvements, again described on page number 9. You can see, again, the wear and tear, but probably more importantly, the area that we're located in. And I won't cover this 4 times as we go forward, so I'll probably limit most of my comments to this first one here. The area that we're located in is a somewhat disadvantaged area within the city of Winnipeg. There is significant social issues and criminal activity that goes along with that, as well as just general graffiti, physical damage, broken locks as break-ins occur. I believe this one I showed the broken mailboxes, perhaps I didn't. It all has an effect on the desirability of a property, A, to rent there, B, what you'd be willing to pay to rent there. So that would have an impact on vacancy, of course. And obviously those financial factors have an impact on what the desirability of that property is to an investor in purchasing a property in that area. Page 10 gives you the site. There is no on-site parking for the property. Property location is shown on page number 11, and from the red dot you can see where it's located on Maryland, between Sargent and Wellington. And at the bottom I've provided a statistical chart just to give a sense of the specific neighborhood that we're in. So we have a column indicating City of Winnipeg statistics, and then we have a column indicating that general area, and giving you a breakdown of some particular stats in between the two. So you can see that average household income is under half of the norm for City of Winnipeg in this area. Change in household income in the prior 5 years, minimal uptick in this area versus the city. Over 83% of dwellings being rented in the area versus owned. Participation rate in the economy is shown with a lower participation in the area, of course, and then unemployment in the area is just under 9% versus an average of 3.6 in the city as a whole. So these are just some general parameters to give you an indication of some of the challenges faced by residents of that particular area. One stat that I wanted to include that wasn't able to locate is transfer payments and the prevalence of those in particular areas. I had found that in previous cycles but was unable to in the latest census data because it has changed. So that's the type of location that we're dealing with. The prevalence of criminal activity in this area and just general social ills related to drug trade, etc., is very commonly noted in the media as we follow along day to day. So it's relatively certainly well known that this area would be at least as challenged an area as the areas in the north end that were referred to earlier as area number 4 as laid out by the City of Winnipeg. So moving forward from there, we have a sale of the property in February 2015 for $510,000. It has subsequently had some renovation done, obviously, in 2015 and 16, in which they added a couple of suites and did some renos to the units themselves. Moving on from there into our actual valuation of the property, we have a breakdown of the type of units on page number 13. The average rents for the building actually come out to $794 per suite for the subject property. And we'll get to that on my chart. The rents are, I believe, included at the back. The comparables are shown at the bottom of the page. Typically, you can see the range of rents in the 1 bedrooms and the 2 bedrooms being the most common. These are generally older structures, most of them generally in that West End neighborhood. And we have 1 bedrooms ranging from $470 to $675 and 2 beds from $640 to $775. I would note on page 14 that the subject is under RTB rule, of course, under rent control, so they cannot increase their rents beyond where they are without further investment. So the subject was under renovation in 2015-16 with a first full year of operation in 2017. So the rental revenue for 2017 was recorded as $154,830 at full occupancy. We've deducted 1.5% from this revenue, which represents the RTB increase for 2017. So deducting that 1.5% brings us down to a gross rent of $152,508. To that, we added $300 in storage income that's reported, and that gives us a gross annual income of $152,808. To this, we've applied the 2.8% vacancy rate. There's further stats there regarding that. Moving on to the expense allowance. Again, property was not occupied and operational in 15 and 16, so first full year being 17. The property showed reported expenses of $66,236. However, this reflects a repair and maintenance amount of just under $20,000, which is $593 a suite. If you look back at the photos of the subject property, and my general assumption regarding the interior of the units, given the other properties that we'll look at, this is extremely low. A more reasonable estimate of repair for a building built in 1913 and in this condition would be $1,500 a unit, or $24,000. So we have added the difference between the two to the operating expenses, giving us a total of $80,750 for that 2017 year. To be fair, we've deducted 1.5% from this amount as well, bringing the operating expenses down to $79,539. So moving on to page 16, the summary of this down to the NOI is shown. There is the correction to the expense allowance, that being $79,539 versus $88,441. And this produces an NOI of $68,990 for the subject property. Can we have a pause just for a minute while I do a calculation here?
Yes.
Is that fair? Thank you. Okay. I would like to make a further correction, and obviously an apology for an error that crept into the analysis here. That being that the difference stated in the operating expenses was significantly overstated, and our final expense allowance is actually $69,539 versus $79,539. This obviously has a significant impact on the final valuation.
What was that number, Mr. Smith? 69?
$69,539.
Thank you.
So, using this expense allowance, it gives us a net operating income of $78,990. for the subject property. Moving on to capitalization rate. We have our study of cap rates on page number 17.
I'm sorry, what's the new net operating income?
The new net operating income is $78,990, and that's changing the expense allowance to $69,539. And again, my apologies for that. Moving on to capitalization rate. I'll note in advance, I just did a hearing on 4 other properties located in this immediate area of the same vintage with the same property management, very similar conditions in which we presented the same material and had decisions come out at the capitalization rate as I suggested in my briefs here today, and I do have information for that. They were just issued following the submission of these briefs here for today's hearing. So page number 17 indicates our capitalization rate chart. These properties were purchased for in-place income. They weren't purchased for conversion, so there was no additional upside. So they do represent true capitalization rates in the marketplace. Certainly one telling one is 432 Furby, the second one from the bottom of the chart. The property traded in 2013, it was renovated at the time, built in 1910, and the property was purchased for conversion to condominiums. And of the 13 units in the building, in the intervening period between then and now, they've managed to sell a total of 4 units out of 13. So that would indicate that the optimism that they had in paying $1.5 million, cap rate of 6%, was certainly overstated, as they're unable to transact those at a relatively reasonable valuation in that neighborhood. So 6% is certainly very low for the area. Other properties in reasonably close proximity in the Wolseley area, 210 Jameson, 129 Lenora, we're looking at 6.4 and 6.3%. Both of those properties are south of Portage Avenue in Wolseley. Transactions in 15 and 16. So these would be the most indicative of cap rates for the area. Now, looking at the subject property in the area itself, we're located in the West End Spence, not in Wolseley. The area has generally higher vacancy, lower rental rates, and significantly higher crime and social issues, including issues as stated at the bottom there. The 2 charts on the following pages 18 and 19 represent the large commercial brokerages estimate of capitalization rates for investment grade properties. The subject property would not fall within those guidelines. It's not considered to be an investment grade property. Overall, the subject is built in 1914. It's located in a very tough region of the city. You can see evidence of that on my photos of the property. It's certainly well known. They have had some crime within the property. It's indicated by property management. So this affects obviously occupancy, rental rates, desirability of the property, and from an investment perspective would drive the cap rate up. So we have utilized a cap rate of 7%, similar to the City of Winnipeg's high end of 6.75% for the subject property. And when we utilize our revised net income of $78,990, we come to a market value of $1,128,000, based on a cap rate of 7%. And again, I just had a hearing on properties at 583 Furby, 485 Furby, 480 Young, and 615 Sherbrooke, in which 7% was the accepted cap rate on all of those properties. And that is my evidence. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Wong, questions for the assessor? Or, I'm sorry, for the applicant?
For, I guess on the 2017 statement that you provided at the back,
Yes.
their operating income was 10,800. Is it 10,800?
Where are we looking?
Their net income?
Yes, but that includes, of course, mortgage payments as part of the expenses, which we deducted. Obviously.
Okay, so if you deduct the $110,000 mortgage, their net income would be $120,000. Is that correct?
Just give me a moment. I don't want to comment until I'm sure. So their actual rental income was $152,508 for the year, based on their actual rents that are in place. And then, of course, with the deduction for vacancy to bring that down, and the expenses as I show them, we did make a 1.5% deduction from the expenses to bring them back to a 2016, potential 2016 level. So I stand by my projection of the net income at 78,990. So if you look at, and let's go through this because it's an issue, obviously. Total expenses, 176,576. If you deduct the mortgage payments from that, you come to the, as stated in my materials, you come to the roughly 66,236 in expenses, which is a extremely low amount on the repair and maintenance for a property such as this, so we made an adjustment for that. And ultimately our expense allowance was 69,539 in total. So it all follows along with the materials presented at the back.
I guess the income seems to be higher than what you've estimated. Like they say that it's 187,000. Do you know what the hydro water chargebacks are? It seems to be the difference.
Well, water is meant to be included in the rent for the suites, as well as heat, and the hydro chargeback, I don't have detail on what the amount of that would be. But again, as indicated with the rental rate comparables on page number 13, we're comparing apples to apples here in most of these instances where heat and water are included and only hydro is accepted. So it certainly falls within the range of the properties on the marketplace.
That would be all my questions.
Thank you. Mr. Hutchins, questions?
If you bear with, maybe ask Linda first, just do if you wouldn't mind.
Certainly.
Thanks. I'll just-
Ms. McFadden?
On your comparables, you indicated that Jameson was in Wolseley. Are you sure that that's the case?
I believe I had checked that earlier this week. If I was slightly off, I apologize, but I believe that that is in Wolseley. No, it is not. My mistake, sorry.
Okay.
It was simply the Lenora one that was in Wellesley, and Jameson is of course off of Henderson Highway.
Correct. So does that change your analysis at all on the capitalization rate?
No, in fact, it doesn't. And
Okay.
sorry that I had lumped the two of them together there, but if you look at, so 129 Lenora, again, we're looking at Elmwood, just over the bridge from downtown. Again, a somewhat challenged neighborhood, but certainly further up the ladder than Spence West End, and we're getting a cap rate in 2016 of 6.3% in that neighborhood. So no, I absolutely don't change my mind with regard to what a cap rate would be for the subject area.
I think that's all my questions for the moment.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Mr. Smith, on page 20 of your income analysis, you're saying the rent income is approximately 152,000. According to the assessor, the potential would be 174,000, based on the evidence provided by an assessor who inspected the property.
So I'm looking at the materials submitted by the city here, and there's no indication of that. And if you look at, and again,
Well, I asked him the question whether the assessor detailed what the rent rates were in spring of 2016, and he gave me $775 for 4 one-bedroom units. 2 bedrooms, 8 of them at $900 a month, and 3 bedrooms at $1,050.
So I guess my comment would be with regard to that, at the end of 2017, we have a total rent in the $155,000 neighborhood, and we have rent discounts that are very commonly applied in that neighborhood. So perhaps the rents that were given to the assessor at the time were their top end rents that they're able to charge under RTB, not necessarily what they achieve.
And do you think they're removing that caretaker's suite in the income, possibly?
Certainly, it is possible that they moved that into it, but it's the projected rent that we have takes into account all of the units, all 16 of them, in the first operational year, with a deduction to represent the increase in rent for the 2017 operational year.
Okay. So your NOI ends up being higher than the city's?
It does, yes.
And your cap rate ends up being higher in your estimation at 7%. You're asking us to revise it to $1,128,000.
That is correct.
Thank you very much. That's all my questions.
I have no questions, thank you.
Thank you. Very quick statement. I apologize for the errors that crept into this brief. I'm not happy about it, and I know how it looks, and I do apologize for that. It's unusual for that to occur.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there any desire for summation on this property, Mr. Smith?
No.
Perhaps we'll reserve that. You said there's similar properties. We'll reserve it till the end of the hearing, and if you so wish, you can do so at that time.
Stu, could I ask for a quick break, please?
Yes, we'll take, 10 minutes. Okay, we'll adjourn. reconvene, please. And the next property we'll deal with is 737 Sergeant Avenue. When you're ready, Mr. Assessor, beginning with the roll number, please.
Okay. The subject property is 737 Sergeant. The roll number is 130-316-98000. It's a residential apartment block that's 3 stories high. It was built in 1914, but we have an effective year built in 1959. There are 46 suites with 0 outdoor parking stalls. On page 2, sales request for income information. They submitted, I guess, once more recently for 2015. There's a sale in 2008 for $1,120,000. We use average rents of $691 to get a potential income of $381,000. It's a 2.8% vacancy. Get an effective gross income of $371,000. We use the 40% expense ratio to get a net operating income of $222,000. Capped at 5.5%, we have an estimated market value of $4,049,000. The value was revised or reduced to $3,619,000 for 2018, and the owner had accepted this recommendation from the department. So the value for this for 2019 is $3,619,000, which came from the 2018 Board of Revision hearing. On page 4 are our rent comparables. Those rents we've used are in line with what's on the market. On page 5 is a summary of the information that was available to us, which is 2015. Their income is $374,000. On a 2.8% vacancy, their operating income is $364,000. Their expenses are $103,000, and their net operating income is $261,000. That's almost $40,000 higher than what the model has estimated at $222,000. On page 6, there's information on how we derived our cap rates. On page 8 are some pictures of the subject property. Page 9 is the 2015 income and expense questionnaire from the owner. And on my last page, there is a permit for some work that was done to the property in 2013. The model rents that we use are supported by their actual rent and what's on the market. The expenses are on the are at 40% are reasonable because the tenants pay for all the utilities. So the actual performance of the building supports the model value, and the owner for the 2018 year accepted the recommendation. So the owner felt it was reasonable. So I asked that you maintain the assessment at $3,619,000 for 2019.
Thank you. Smith, questions for the assessor?
Yes, just looking at your page number 5, you have down the expenses for 2015 at 103,069. Is the city aware that's only 7 months of the year represented? So that would
It's
change.
what was presented.
Okay, so that's 7 months of operating expenses. A full year would change that significantly, would it not?
Potentially, yes.
And for future years would be roughly double that expense amount, would they not? So 103,069 is clearly not a supportable expense for the property.
This is what was presented.
Okay. The rent comparables on page 4, 583.30, there's vacancy rate of roughly, it's over 15% there, plus bad debt at that location. Would that affect the view of the rent coming in at that location?
Potentially.
Okay. And then we have 540 Maryland, which I withdrawn earlier today, fully renovated, it's still good condition. That would be superior to the subject.
I wouldn't be able to say.
Okay. Those are, and then the sale price of 1,120,000, and we're now looking at 3.6 million in a 10-year span. Does that seem to represent fair market value?
As far as I know, the market from a certain time frame has gone up 100%, 200%, and 300%. So I mean, I don't think it's. I think it is possible.
Okay, and you were unable to inspect this property?
I did not. My colleague did.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Hutchins, questions?
Thank you. Mr. Wong, just to confirm, the 2019 assessment reflects the 2018 Board of Revision decision?
Yes, that was.
Okay.
It was a recommendation made by the assessment department, which the applicant accepted.
Okay, at $3,619,000.
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. No other questions.
Ms. McFadden?
The model has developed an expense rate of 40%. Would you expect that low an expense rate in a building that age?
Typically, no, but it was actually an override expense rate that my colleague had applied for this property due to the fact that the utilities were being covered, all the utilities were being covered by the tenant.
And would that also be based on the mailer that came in that we're being told was 7 months worth of income, not a year?
No, it was based off of information from my colleague who inspected the property.
Thank you. That's all.
Just a couple of questions here. Firstly, this 3,619,000. On your page 3, you don't really show us how that was derived. Can you tell us how that value came into effect?
I think the recommendation was made on our part. Due to the model estimating rents that were higher than what the property was actually achieving, so the department made a recommendation that included more reflective rents of what the subject property was getting. It was estimating too high, and so we made a few adjustments to more accurately reflect the rents that were being achieved, and that is how the $3.6 million was arrived at.
Okay, but you don't have the actual workup?
No, I don't.
Okay, and 1914 original building, and I see the effective age has changed to 1959. I'm assuming that's due to the renovations and, so but 1959 would affect the cap rate that was applied, would it not?
It would,
So,
if it was 1914, it would be 6%, but because it's 1959, it's 5.5%.
right, but the property that we just heard was a 1913 building, but it was only varied to
1945.
so that didn't affect it. In this case, it does. Is there a reason why this is a 1959? Is this a calculated variant? Was there more substantial work done, to your knowledge?
All the suites were renovated, and my colleague had adjusted the effective year built to reflect those renovations.
Okay. And just page 11 here. If I do the count here, it's only 45 suites. Would it be perhaps 45 suites and a caretaker suite that they're not including to get to that 46? Would you know?
Sometimes, I don't know, but sometimes, I do know that sometimes they don't report the caretaker suite. And like, there have been times where we try to reconcile the differences, and they sometimes don't include the caretaker suite. So it's sometimes you have to take it with a grain of salt, or yeah.
Okay, but based on your colleague's inspection, you're confident in the 46 suite count?
Yes.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, can I make a
Follow-up?
follow-up, please? Yeah.
Certainly.
On page 3, I think that would be the revised workup. That is the assessed amount, right?
I don't believe it is.
Oh, no, right, I see, capitalized.
Yeah, the capitalized income is
Oh,
4
okay,
million.
you're right,
49,
I'm sorry,
yeah.
I apologize. Okay.
Okay. Mr. Smith, we'll hear from you, please.
Okay, great, and I'll be briefer, obviously, from the first time.
A lot of
The same materials. There are obviously differences, but we won't cover the same ground over and over. So, the property we're looking at now, 737 Sargent, also in the Spence West End neighborhood. And fortunately, I was able to access the units in this property and give you a better sense of what renovated units in some of these properties can look like inside. So this, just a bit of background on this property. There is gang activity that has taken hold in this property. The owners and managers obviously do their absolute best to deal with that and evict those tenants or tenants and or people that just move into tenant suites as they can, but it is an ongoing issue because of some history of the building, I believe, and the location. So you have these activities happening within the building. Obviously, that affects other residents in the building and their willingness to stay there. You get greater vacancy. Greater vacancy drives lower rental rates in order to get people in it, and people move in, and they see the gang activity and they move out, so it's an ongoing cycle. And if we flip to my photographs, there's a couple of the exteriors on page 4, and then we get into the inside. You can see the recently repaired mailboxes at the bottom of 5 have already started to be broken into. Happens on an ongoing basis, mail theft continually to try and get false identifications, etc. Then we have evidence of the gang activity on page 6. This is fairly continual. They obviously take care of these things as they can when they pop up, but it seems to be an ongoing battle with this particular property and some of the other ones, given the location. So there have been obviously drug activity, many police call-outs, etc. to this location. Page 7 gives you some of the interior common areas at the top with all the damage recently repaired on the hallway going down. You have a renovated kitchen at the bottom of the page 7 with doors torn off of cabinetry, damaged finishings, etc. Broken windows, just general extremely hard use and the damage that comes with the type of occupancy that has happened in this location. If you flip to page number 11, you can see the site description and an aerial. Part of the issue with the block is the easy access, relatively easy access from the rear. As you can see, there's an interior, somewhat courtyard, which allows people to come in through the back and access the building that way, so people the gangs just get into the building as it is and conduct their activities. So we have a description of the damages, etc. on page number 10. Obviously, broken locks and door frames, lots of theft, significant damage to the common areas and the suites themselves. So there's the evidence of the type of buildings that we're looking at. I couldn't show you that for the last one because I didn't have the photos, but it's not any different, is my indication. Page 10, or 12 rather, gives you the overview of the area. Same exact area we're in the Spence West Broadway area. We are 737 Sargent. Property sold for $1,120,000 in 2008. My indication is that we have 47 suites in this building, and that probably includes the caretaker suite, the plus one. The rents for the building, which are included in the addenda, range between $378 and $925, and this is ranging from bachelors up to 2-bedroom units. They're included for you there. We provide our rental comparables on the chart. The subject property generally falls within those, with some of the rents being higher, but again, they're not necessarily achieving those asked for rents. There are discounts that are applied, and obviously significant vacancy. So looking at having been in the property and seen the condition of it, I would estimate it to be below average in terms of quality. From what I saw, yes, there have been renovations. Yes, there's been extensive damage to those renovations since they've occurred. So the rents that are in place are what's achievable. So their actual gross potential rent comes to $382,512, which is an average of $678 per suite. There is no parking or laundry revenue for the subject. Moving on to vacancy, the property reported vacancy of 7.4% in 2015. With an estimate of roughly 6.5% for the 2016 year. property is in poor condition or below average condition certainly. And there is a safety issue certainly in this building, which also drives vacancy if you have gang activity occurring. So we've applied a rental, or rather a vacancy rate of 7% for the area. Midland in general has a vacancy rate of 4% overall. For this property, certainly 7% is not overestimating it. Our expense allowance at the bottom of page 16, the 7 months that were reported for 2015 is actually only 7 months of expenses. The total 2016 expenses came to 216 and a little bit. We've made a slight deduction to that to 215,000 as a reasonable estimate of operating expenses for the property. And again, all that material is included in the addenda. So utilizing this, these facts, we come down to an NOI of $140,736,000. Now, moving on to cap rate, the same evidence is there before you. Again, the city has a top cap rate of 6.75%. We have a building originally built in 1914, located on Sargent in tough, renovated but tough condition, very tough location with criminal activity that unfortunately invades it on an ongoing basis. This is not any kind of property that you pay a normal capitalization rate for. There's significant premiums that would have to be applied to this. We haven't overestimated the expenses. They're based on the actual expenses for the property. The rental income roughly matches the city. Vacancy is as stated higher than normal. So using our capitalization rate of 7% supported by recent decisions, we come to a market value of $2,011,000. And that is my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Wong, questions for the applicant?
Going to the rent roll, your 2015 rent roll that you provided. I don't know what page it's on, but at the end of the 2015 rent roll. I'm not sure if you can try and find it.
Yeah.
I guess it would be page 11 of the 2015 rent roll.
Yeah, I'm there.
Okay. Here you guys. Okay. I guess the total charges, including the discounts, are 28,000, and the vacancy is 6,400. The total for the total charges plus the vacancy is 35,237. That works out to a GPI of 422,000.
Okay. Well, I'll be clear about the rents that I've used here. I went through each of the units that are here and what's actually being charged for that unit, and applied those rental rates. So it's taken directly off of the rents as of the appropriate time frame. So I didn't take the number that's shown at the bottom of that and apply that. And I think that the rents that I'm using are the rents that are being charged, and they're all right here. So to take the summary of them and make an application, I don't agree with. If we do your calculation from before, where we look at the expenses and the revenues deducting mortgage expense, we come to an NOI of 129,319, which is slightly under my 140,736. So I mean, it's easy make these changes. The rents that are there are the actual rents being charged. And I believe that we fall within $1,000 of the city's estimated rent. So on that front, I think it's pretty fair.
Yeah, I just wanted to maybe understand the difference a little bit. Because you're using 382 and I'm calculating 422. So you're saying that
It's based on the actual rent. So if you watch to go through the individual units and work out the rents, it's all there for you.
and they've summarized it for us.
Well,
I just want to understand the difference.
I can't be clearer. I went line by line and looked at each individual rent at the appropriate time frame, and the rents come out to 382.
Okay, no, I just want to try to understand the difference. That's all my questions.
Thank you. Mr. Hutchings, questions for the applicant?
Yes, the rent roll states 2 addresses, but is that under the same roll number, 737 and 7?
That's correct. It's one roll number,
743.
same building,
Two
just 2
entrances.
addresses. Yeah.
Okay. That's my only question, thank you.
Thank you. Ms. McFadden?
So you're saying that you use the number under tenant total on that rent roll, then, that you added all of those individually, and that's how you arrived at your rents, correct?
I did add each of the individual rents being charged less any discount that was applied to that unit, as that's the rent that's being paid for those units.
Correct. I just noticed that on most of the vacant units, the rent is quite a bit lower actually than the expected rent they're paying is quite a bit lower than, which would lower the overall amount.
I did include, a rent roll from the end of 2016 as well, so I did make any adjustments that would have happened to those units if it happened within the relevant time frame. So if at the end of December 2015 it showed as vacant and they had a lower rent, but it increased, pardon me, if it increased prior to April 1 when it was occupied, then I would use that rent.
Right, but my point is this, that you take it into consideration that the total amount of rent available and applied a vacancy rate of 7%. So you've obviously gone through all of those.
Mm-hmm.
All I'm saying is that the total amount of rent available looks like it would be underestimated based on the expected rents for all the vacant units, what they've got here. So expected rent is $358. Tenant total is generally around $600 or $700. There's none that are as low as $358.
So it would depend on the type of unit. If it was a bachelor unit in the basement, there might be some that would be at that lower end. And as you go through them, you can see the discounts that
Right.
that are applied as well. So I certainly understand your point,
Okay.
but it would depend on the type of unit that it is.
Okay, thank you. That's all my question.
Thank you.
And
So,
condition.
so just to clarify, so you went through it and you applied what they had and the expected rent where it's vacant to get a potential, and then you applied a vacancy rate of 7%?
That's correct.
Would it not have made more sense just to use the ones that were occupied?
Well,
Did you go through that exercise to see whether it was the same?
I did. So my vacancy, if you go through the point in time vacancy, so again, this is not looking
No,
at a whole year, I don't
understand.
have those figures unfortunately,
Yeah.
but if you go through the 2015 rent roll that I had, you come up with a vacancy rate of 7.4%, and the same thing for 2016, we have 6.5%. And again, this is reflective of the property that it is, the issues that are there, the desirability of that building, and obviously that impacts occupancy and the rent that they're able to charge there too. If I'm looking for a unit in that area and I can go to this building that I know has issues, or I can go to a building in a slightly different location that doesn't have the same issues and pay the same rent, I'm going to go there. Or I'm going to pay a lot less rent to go to this one.
Okay, so those two numbers you gave me, the 7,465, whichever the percentage was that what the expected rent? Is that what that was, or was that just the number of units?
That's the unit counts.
So it's
So the
unit
number of
count.
occupied units, number of unoccupied versus occupied at the point in time. So it's not the revenue for 1 month versus, pardon me, versus the total achievable revenue for that month.
Okay.
I mean, there's two means of doing it, but I don't.
And your suite count and suite mix on page 3 does not seem to correspond to the assessor's page 11 was his information received from the owner.
Well, my information is as requested from the property management for the building, so they do the leasing for all of it, and they've indicated the suite counts as noted there, and I have one additional unit than what the city has. That's
Yeah.
apparently what they have.
Seems strange because they're on the handwritten one by the property manager, it's 6, and 33, and what you're reporting is 9, 7, and 31.
Yes.
But you're confident in those numbers, those are what we're reporting to?
I'm confident that that was reported by the head of the property management firm, so they would be the one that would control what that information as far as what their suite counts are. So I did not visit each individual unit to confirm them.
Okay. And that's just more of an observation than anything. The bottom of page 7, your photo of the kitchen.
Yeah.
Guess you like that one so much you included it on page 9 as
Oh,
well.
was it duplicated? Sorry.
Mr. Chair, I'm sorry, I have another question.
Okay, please.
Thank you. I realize this is a new hearing, Mr. Smith, but do you have any knowledge of what happened in 2018 with that recommendation?
I do not.
Acceptance?
No,
You weren't
I
involved.
honestly, that is news to me. I was hired in June of this year, and that information was not passed on to me, that the individual owner had appealed it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Pardon?
Where did I put them?
Oh, it's there, I thought it was yours. I was gonna keep it, but.
Oh, that's in Sherbrooke.
Yep, we'll move on to 552 Sherbrooke when you're ready, Mr. Assessor.
I guess maybe I'll just make a comment about the previous property before we move on.
Oh, actually, when we get to 552 Sherbrooke, the previous,
Just 737.
Like the 737.
okay, go ahead.
Well, yeah, I just wanted to say, like, you know, the owner felt it was 3.6 million was kind of reasonable, and you know, market value is, definition of market value is like, you know, kind of like a willing buyer and a willing seller. So if maybe the owner felt it was potentially worth 3.6 million, that the likelihood that he would sell it for 2 million is probably low.
So,
Were you the assessor that was
No.
dealing with that? So
No.
this is speculation on your part, so I'm taking that as a summation?
Yeah.
Mr. Smith?
So in summation, none of us were sitting in on that hearing, I'm assuming. We don't know what occurred. I don't have any indication why the owner would accept that. And the definition of market value is certainly more extensive than that provided. Whether the owner was willing to accept that as a reduction is not an indication of what the property would trade for on the market. I think the facts speak for themselves.
Thank you. So 552 Sherbrooke, we have a preliminary issue with this one? Is that correct?
Yes.
What is
They
that
were-
issue?
They were non-compliant in our request for income and expense information. They haven't been compliant, and that is a reason we're seeking, I guess, non-compliance for this, and ask for the penalties that relate to that.
And your evidence for that is where?
It's on, I guess, on my page 2, shows that the income and expense request that we've made for 2015 and in the previous years, they've not been returned. And the penalties for non-compliance is, reversal bonus and, I guess deferring any sort of reductions that might result as a result of the hearing. On page 9 is the certified letters that we sent out. So we're asking for a reversal bonus because they did not respond to our request for income expense information.
Mr. Smith, questions for the assessor regarding this request?
Yes, the property traded in August of 2015, correct? This is regarding the request as well.
Yes.
So any previous non-submission is not anything to do with the current owner, correct? Anything prior to that date? Your history on page number 2?
The thing is, we made the request for the information, the property transacted in August of 2015. We made the request for information in
Yeah.
April of 2016.
So I'm getting to that, but my question was, none of the non-submissions prior to that have anything to do with the current owner, correct?
No.
So, in your evidence, it's, I believe, noted in mine as well, that the property was undergoing renovations following that purchase in 2015 and 16, is that correct? So the building wouldn't be operating?
Oh, what does that have to do with the compliance?
Well, it has everything to do with the compliance. So the building would have no income or expenses in which to report to the city, would they not? If it was fully vacant and being renovated?
Well, I think the non-compliance is due to the fact that we requested information and nothing was provided.
Okay, so to that point, earlier today, we had a very similar property traded in 2015. They submitted their, and was undergoing renovation unoccupied in that time span. They submitted their information to the city indicating that the property was unoccupied and supplied no information to the city. I believe the indication is that there's no information there that would not be used in the determination of the assessment, correct?
I just don't understand what that has to do with us requesting information and the owner not responding to
Well, they
it.
could respond to you and so in the exact same manner and indicate that the building was 100% vacant and unoccupied and there was nothing to supply to you, and then you would not utilize that information in determining the assessment
That's
model.
your point. Like, my point is, like, we requested the information and it was not supplied. That's our point.
Yes, and I understand that. You're correct. It was not supplied. My point to the board that I'm making, and this is challenging if I'm supposed to be asking questions rather than, do I?
Well, you will have
Okay,
an
I'll
opportunity.
stop there then. I apologize for that.
Mr. Hutchins, did you have questions for the assessor?
No questions, thank you.
Mr. McFadden?
No.
Okay, so now would be your opportunity with respect to.
Yes, and again, sorry for the jumping in early on that aspect. So, again, this is, there's a number of properties that were purchased by associated ownerships under one property management group in 2015, to which they undertook some renovations in 15 and 16. In the one instance, as we covered earlier on, I think 693 Maryland, they did submit the income and expense questionnaire, and they indicated on there that the property was fully vacant and unoccupied during 2015, during that time frame, and they didn't report anything because there was nothing to report. And I asked the question of the city whether that income and expense questionnaire would be included in their model, as there was nothing there to essentially use. So I believe that, I'm not sure if the individual assessor indicated it or not, but I believe that that would be set aside, obviously, as not being, there's no information to include in the model there, so it wouldn't be taken into account in determining the assessment of that property. We're in the same situation here, other than they didn't write on an income and expense form not occupied and submit it to the city of Winnipeg at that time frame. But had they, that information would not have been used in determining the assessment of the building, or in use in the model to determine value on a greater basis on all multifamily properties. So to submit it for no purpose, I guess it simply wasn't acknowledged. I guess they didn't know that there was a penalty for it, but my greater point is that it wouldn't have been taken into account anyway, even if it was sent in.
Thank you. Mr. Wong, any questions of what the applicant has stated?
Did they respond to the request for information?
They did not.
Mr. Hutchins, any questions for the applicant?
No, thank you.
Ms. McFadden?
No.
I don't either. We will recess and
We will leave, right?
we will leave, yes.
Really?
Yes, we leave.
Okay, we will reconvene, so I'll call the hearing back to order. We have deliberated, and we have decided that we are going to grant the request within the assessor for non-compliance, and therefore it will put the burden of proof on the applicant. So, Mr. Smith?
Well, seeing as how we're in the second year of the cycle, I'll ask for 54-1 if I may at this point. If the panel wishes to glance at the interior photos of the building, I'd certainly leave that up to you, but it's indicative of what the value should be on this property. Very similar problems to the property we just covered on Sargent.
Mr. Wong, did you have any questions of what the applicant has just said?
No.
Mr. Hutchins?
No, thank you.
Ms. McFadden? Just one, Mr. Smith, you didn't represent the owner for the 2018 appeal, I'm assuming?
I did not.
Mr. Wong, can we hear from you, please? Just beginning with the roll number, if you could briefly walk us through your evaluation for this project.
Sure. The subject property is 552 Sherbrooke. The roll number is 130-505-51000. It's a residential apartment block that's 3 stories high. It's built in 1914. We have an effective year built in 1934. There are 28 suites with no outdoor parking stalls. On page 2, some sales history on that subject property. Sold in 2015 for $1,050,000. On page 3 is our income valuation. We use average rent of $738 to get a potential income of $248,000. We use the 2.8% vacancy to get an effective gross income of $241,000. Use a 54% expense ratio to get a net operating income of $109,000. At 6%, we have an estimated market value of $1,824,000, but the value was reduced. It was reduced at the Board of Revision and for the 2018 year to $1,791,000, and the non-co-op was granted in 2018 as well. Page 4 are rent comparables. Page 5 is information on how we derive our cap rates. Page 7 and 8 are some pictures of the subject property. Page 9 to 21 is the mailer that we sent to the owner. On page 23 is the information that was presented by the owner for 2018. This estimated value was $1,662,000 using a 7% cap rate. The $1,791,000 was the Board of Revision decision from 2018.
Thank you. Mr. Smith, questions of the assessor?
I have none.
Mr. Hutchins?
No, thank you.
Ms. McFadden? I just have an observation, or I guess I do have a question. When were these photos taken? subject property? That was upon inspection of your colleague, I'm assuming?
No, these ones, they were not from an inspection, they were from an ad on the internet.
Okay, just my observation is they differ quite a bit from the photos that are presented here, so perhaps
Well,
the
the
internet
thing
isn't
is,
always
yeah,
indicative of the actual property.
I think they can be indicative, they can be an indication, but to understand that maybe not all the units are as good as this may look, or on the other side, as bad as some of the other pictures may look. So, I mean, I always take things with a grain of salt. I mean, it just sort of gives you an idea. It doesn't mean that this is, I guess, everything about the property. But I feel like it gives you an idea, and that's kind of what we're after.
I guess my point is recent inspections are always desirable in giving evidence.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, that will bring us to 620 William. When you're ready, Mr. Long.
The subject property is 620 William. The roll number is 130-614-870-00. It's a residential apartment block that's 3 stories high. It was built in 1914 and has 18 suites with 5 outdoor parking stalls. On page 2 is the request for income information history and the subject sales history. There's a sale in 2008 for $290,000 and a sale in 2005 for $440,000. From what we could tell, the 2005 sale was quantified and the 2008 sale was not. It was a transfer sale. On page 3 is our income valuation summary. We use average rents of $615 to get a potential income of $132,000. Use a 2.8% vacancy to get an effective gross income of $129,000. And use the 59% expense ratio to get a net operating income of $51,000. Capped at 6%, we have an estimated market value of $865,000. On page 4 are our rent comparable, showing that the rents we've used are in line on the market. On page 5 is a summary of the income and expense information that we have, which is only for 2015. Their income on page 11 for their income and expense mailer, they didn't put their actual income, but on their on page 13 it shows that their potential is $95,000. Their gross potential income is $95,000. I'm applying a 2.8% vacancy. They have their operating income is $92,000. Their expenses are $44,000, giving a net operating income of $48,000. That's not quite. The model has estimated $51,000, just a little bit higher than what their actuals are indicating, but it is reasonably close. On page 6 is information on how to derive our cap rates. Page 8 and 9 are some pictures of the subject property. Sorry, we were only able to do an exterior inspection of the property. We weren't able to get into the building. As So the pictures are from the same thing, from an ad on the internet. And on page 10, just indicating that the suites have been renovated. The estimated income from their 2015 mailer supports the model value. It's based off of limited information, but it is pretty close to what the model is estimated. So I ask you to maintain the assessed value at $865,000.
Thank you. Mr. Smith, questions for the assessor?
Yes, as you indicated on page 5, and I guess on the page of the mailer, page 13 there, the 100% occupied gross rent would total $95,544, and yet the model is projecting $132,853, roughly $35,000 to $40,000 greater in gross potential rent. Does that seem accurate?
It doesn't look, no.
Okay. The cap rate utilized on this property, built in 1914, I see is 6%.
Yes.
And again, if this were to fall in area 4,
Yeah.
it would be 6.75%.
Yes.
Okay. And our other properties today were built in that similar vintage? In the 1910 to 1920 range? Okay. Just one quick comment, and I see that they didn't indicate this on the form. The expenses that are shown on page number 11 of the income expense mailer represent 7 months of operating expenses. That's when the property management firm took over the property, so it's not a full year of expenses, just to,
So I
know
guess,
that that's not a question.
I guess your question is, was he aware of that?
Yes, I'm more pointing it out. I understand the city wasn't aware of that, just indicating that it's not a full year's of expenses. Those are all of my questions, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I just want to say, like, with the limited information that we have, this is what we estimated.
Mr. Hutchings, questions for the assessor?
Oh, thank you.
Ms. McFadden?
The 7 months doesn't also apply to the income received, or the income received is based on?
No, that's the projected full
Okay,
occupancy.
thank you. That's all.
Nothing for the assessor?
No.
I guess just one question. You provided us with photos from the website showing the renovated suites. Has there not been an inspection done on this property using it?
I think we tried. We tried to inspect the property, but we didn't get a response.
Okay. And that's why there was never an age variant applied to the property?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, basically, as far as we are concerned, it is not renovated because.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Smith, we'll hear from you, please.
Okay, so 620 William, built in 1914, 18 total units, 9 of them being 1 beds, 6 2 beds, and 3 bedroom units as it's indicated. The property is located in the same general area as the others, and faces the same issues. If you look at the photos of the property beginning on page 4, yes, there has been some renovation of units. Not all of them show as indicated in the city's brief, not I tried to show a balance essentially. I have a couple of different units here. I was not in one that looked like the ones in the city's brief. So there may be a couple like that, but in general, I think we've portrayed the property as it stands. So looking at the photos, you can see the exterior. Obviously, the break-ins into the mailboxes for identity theft, ongoing issue in all of these properties. The common areas, extremely warm, damaged, broken windows. You can see the interior of the suites beginning on page 6. Some renovations, you have new tile, new vanity in the bathroom, same tub, same carpet that's been there for a while. In the kitchen, they have new countertops, I believe, and they have probably done some painting in that area too. Moving on, page 8, you can see another kitchen. This is after evicting a tenant. You can see the new countertop on there, damage to the cabinetry, etc. We're going to have to put a new flooring in there. And then just some general condition of the property. The rear door is broken into on a very frequent basis. You've got moisture penetration issues, obviously, around the wood frame windows, and then just general condition issues. So, as with all of these properties today, very heavy use, much rougher condition than a normal market apartment. In all of these properties, and I may not have mentioned this in the others, they do have pest control issues of several varieties. I'm indicated that they have to treat for on an ongoing basis. This property actually had a fire in 2011, which is included in a report in my addenda, I believe. Obviously repaired since that time, but it did have a fire back at that time. There is no on-site parking or revenue generated there. So we can move forward to the valuation. I've given you the rents by unit type in a chart in the middle of page 18 there. As of the valuation date, gives us a gross rent of $106,548. This is slightly later in time than the end of 2015 as recorded on the income and expense mailer, so there were a few renovations, I gather, so there is slightly different rent profile to the building, and that brings it to $106,548 on a gross rent basis, 100% occupied. This does fall in line with the market stats as shown. The actual projected gross rent for 2015 was $95,544. We're 10,000 higher than that at $106,548. Again, there's no parking. We did recognize a laundry amount of $600 in our analysis. Vacancy for the subject property, obviously it was undergoing some degree of renovation in 2015, so the vacancy rate was much higher. We're not pursuing that. It was 3.7% in 2016, so we use the 2.8% as does the city. Expenses for the property, the $44,000 reported for 2015 was only 7 months. And we also had renovations occurring during that time, frame. Pardon me. Their actual expenses, and I've included their income statement at the rear of the brief. Their actual statements for 2015 rather were $56,220, so slightly higher than reported. And in the first full operational year for the building, they had expenses of $61,343. We've made a slight deduction for that to bring it back to the relevant time frame, and we've applied expenses of $60,000 in our valuation for the property. based on the actual operation. So this gives us a, you can also see our expense allowances, or rather expense amount is considerably under the city's projection. Our NOI derived from this is $44,148. I will save my commentary regarding cap rate. We're in the same location with the same issues and the same type of building. We've applied the cap rate of 7% to our NOI, giving us a market value of $630,684. Again, I have decisions that came out after this submission on the exact same type of properties of the same vintage in the same neighborhood, all with our evaluation of these properties fully accepted, both down to the NOI as well as the 7% cap rate. And the addendum materials are there for you to review if you wish. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Wong, questions for the applicant?
I have no questions.
Mr. Hutchins?
No questions, thank you.
I have nothing.
And I have nothing further, thank you. Mr. Smith, was that your summation that you worked in at the end there on your, or?
It's my summation of this property, yes.
Geez, sorry, I guess the thing is,
Would you care for a summation on?
I guess maybe
what we've
just
heard today?
in overall, a general thing with regards to the properties, just with regards to inconsistent information, because the information that Mr. Smith has provided is noticeably different than what was actually provided to us. So I just wanted to see if Mr. Smith was aware of these inconsistent informations and maybe what the penalties might be with regards to providing inconsistent information.
Well, I'm fully aware of what the penalties are with regard to providing inconsistent information. My role here is to represent the client based on the facts of the property, and the facts of the property are based on the actual income and expenses of the property, and I go into perhaps more detail than what's requested from the city in their income and expense questionnaire. To expect all owners of properties to complete their income and expense questionnaire in the exact same fashion to the satisfaction of the city is certainly will not happen and would be considered unfair, and to exclude the true information for the building, or the more complete information, is essentially ignoring fairness and equity. We're just dealing with facts.
Was that your
Yeah.
summation then, Mr. Wong?
It was just, I guess a comment, and I guess one more with regards to post-reference information. Are you aware that I guess you've provided a reasonable amount of post-reference information, or?
I am, and I've spoken to that before the board in this hearing that I was referring to previously with the 4 properties in the immediate area. We have, and I'm not sure why the city doesn't address this, other than they have a hard line on this particular issue for some reason. When you have a property that's bought in the reference here and is vacant and is being renovated and has no income and expense information, can you value it on that basis of nothing, there being no information? So what's the best indicator of what the value of that property would be? Well, it'll be the actual operation of that building once it's renovated, less a deduction to bring it back to the point in time of the valuation date. And that is indeed what we've done. And then comparing it to the market, obviously. So it's not that we've taken post-reference information and simply spread it around. It's that we're trying to determine a fair market value for that building. So why the city doesn't look at the renovated property and what it produces, I'm not sure.
Thank you. Anything further, Mr. Smith? Did you want to recap or?
So my main summation is, you've seen the buildings, you've seen the condition, you've seen the area. I've told you about the issues that are there, both with regard to activities in the buildings and in the general areas. This area is essentially, it's easily equivalent to your Point Douglas's and your small section of the north end that's considered Section 4 by the city. To lump this in with, I don't know what the area includes, whether it's Wolseley and areas further west, and say that it doesn't qualify as receiving the top end cap rate of 6.75% is simply not accurate in the marketplace.
Thank you. Okay, thank you both for your presentations today. You can leave that with us, and you'll receive our decisions by registered mail in due course. Thank you both. With that, I will